Columbus Stadium in Dublin, the home of the
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Osceola's Reeling Them In Recruiting Report. My name is Pat Burnham, and I am joined today by the Osceola recruiting team of Charles Fishbein and Nick Carlisle. Guys, welcome back. It's been well, Nick. I saw you yesterday. I haven't seen Fish since last week because he's been on the roads, beating the streets of South Florida, looking at all the great prospects for 2025, 2026. And probably even 2028 now that I think about it. But guys, listen, welcome back. How's everybody doing?
Doing good.
It's going good. Going good.
Yeah, well, listen, kind of some news going on in recruiting and with the transfer portal as it pertains to Florida State. And obviously most of our show is recruiting based here, but let's start with the portal because it is an arm of the recruiting nowadays in college football. And we got a little boomerang effect out of Boulder yesterday when Omarion Cooper, a former FSU defensive back that showed great promise early in his career. I go back to the 2021 game at Florida where he really looked good. And then he transfers to Colorado for last season and then obviously announced yesterday, guys, that he's coming back. Kind of an odd fit. Given how most people that cover the program have just talked positively about the secondary, about the depth, about the athletic ability. So Fish and Nick, I'm going to ask you guys, where does he fit in? Because to me, what it said is the loss of Greedy Vance is probably a little bit more of a concern than what we think. I've been saying that, but there have been a lot of people that cover the program that just cannot stop talking about Earl Little. But where do you guys see Omarion fitting in? Why do you think they brought him in? And Fish, I'll start with you.
I liked Omarion a lot when he came out of high school, and I thought he showed some promise early on in his career at Florida State. He's got the tools to be a good corner or defensive back in their system. Like you said, they'll probably move him into the slot position. He gives them size and he's got all the skill sets. I don't know what he did at Colorado last year as far as, what he did on the field, but I did like him when he was at Florida State. So I don't think he can hurt. From a number standpoint, we've talked about this off the record and on the record. I don't know what they're going to do as far as these numbers because they do have to get to a certain point, but I don't get paid to do that job. So good luck, Coach Ray and that group up there. So,
yeah. Nick, what are your thoughts? Obviously, when I look at our projected depth chart for Florida State coming out of spring, you've got a redshirt freshman backing up Ventrell Cypress. Then you've got Kevin Knowles and Edwin Joseph right now, at least our depth chart, backing up Earl Little. I think that's probably one of the two positions he fits in at, bringing him back on the roster. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's really interesting because before he transferred to Colorado, Florida State was trying him out at safety. They were giving him some reps at safety. And you got to ask the question of whether or not he's going to be returning on scholarship or not. I think, depending on whether or not that plays a factor into it, that could play a factor into which position he plays. But, I'm not quite sure. As you say, it's kind of an odd one. The defensive back room, it's crazy how things flip over. The defensive back room is a concern going into last season, and now it's a position of strength. So I don't know whether Adam Fuller foresees him going into the slot kind of as a depth piece to replace the loss of Greedy Vance, or if they're going to try and push him back out at safety again. So, I mean, it's odd. It's definitely an interesting addition, but that's really where my questions lie.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. An interesting ad. Listen, I think we go back to the same question we ask ourselves when Greedy left. Was FSU a better football team because Greedy left? No. Are they a better football team because they brought Omarion back in? Probably, yes. He started last year for Colorado. I do think that when you look at the roster, particularly at nickel. Listen, we all know that Earl Little has a lot of the traits that you want in a nickel corner or defensive back in general, but he did not play but 21 snaps last season at Alabama. And then you've got two unknown. Well, you got Edwin Joseph, a redshirt freshman behind him, who has flashed at times, and Kevin Knowles, who a senior, who's listen, he's had some struggles the last couple of years, if we're being honest. And then of course you've got that strong safety. Now I don't think he's a strong safety at all. I would think he'd be more of the I guess a buck safety, but I don't see him as a strong safety body. But it will be interesting, and I think maybe one of the reasons he was brought in was to offset some of the relative youth in that room. So as we know, we're going to hear this all the time from Florida State staff. They're going to cross-train them. Sometimes I think they get too much into that. But listen, he's a depth piece. And listen, even if it's a walk-on, his scholarship is now being funded by Colorado.
No, absolutely, and he's a guy that that you could speak probably more to this. I don't think the defensive scheme has changed radically in the year that he's left. So bringing him in as a guy that you don't have to teach the system to him, apart from signals and calls and small things that would have been updated over the past 8-10 months. But you're able to bring him in. You're going to cross-train him at multiple positions. So it's certainly not the addition from the portal that any of us were really expecting. But I think it definitely cannot hurt, especially if he's off scholarship and are being funded by Colorado.
Well, if he was asked to walk on and come in as a walk-on, I'm sure that NIL money is going towards and listen, and that's the thing, right? The NIL has changed this. It gives you some flexibility you can build a strong walk-on program because you can help subsidize these walk-ons through the NIL program. So it really, if you have a really strong NIL program, you can help fund these preferred walk-ons and guys that come back. But listen, it's a funny time. Back when I was playing and involved on a college football staff, you didn't see players transfer back to a school they started at or attended with before transferring out. So it's another unforeseen consequence of the portal that we've always said we would kind of learn as this thing is going along. But listen, by all counts, Omarion's a great kid, and as Nick said, there will be very little need to assimilate back to the team and to the scheme because he's been here and was here for so long. So anyway, good pickup for Florida State. Makes the defensive room better. It has a little bit more experience. All right, staying on the defensive side of the ball in the portal, JVR Suggs, the Grand Valley State defensive tackle, announced last night that he has narrowed his choices down to 6. Now, it's a little bit different because most of these older portal guys have handled these things more like business decisions and interviews than they do recruiting process. And, of course, now this kid was not highly recruited coming out of high school, so this is probably the first time he's actually been recruited, right? He probably had Grand Valley State and Erie State and a couple Blue Mountain State and a couple others. And, and when you play at that level, you're trying to get recruited, right? So you're recruiting schools. Now he's got a final 6 of FSU, Arkansas, Wisconsin, Michigan, Kentucky, and USC, all of whom he visited. I don't know how to read the tea leaves with him. He is from Michigan, so I would think the Michigan and the Wisconsin offers, if they're legitimate, committable offers, I think they would lead. But, I follow him on Twitter. He does not say a whole lot about his recruitment other than what he puts on social media. How do you guys read the Suggs situation?
Well, I think when it comes to him, he got a lot of offers really, really quickly. He visited a lot of schools really, really quickly. I'm curious to go back and see who he visited in comparison to who offered him. I think there's a couple of schools that he did get offers from that he didn't actually end up going to see. So I don't know if this top 6 is like how much of a condensed list that is.
But it's condensed compared to big time by who it was offered by. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, look, Florida State, I guess I'll just say this. Florida State has shown the capacity in the past that if they really zero in and go all in on a prospect that they want, they can get that guy regardless of whether he is local or not. I definitely agree that if, depending on what his priorities are, if he wants to stay closer to family, that the offers from Wisconsin and Michigan definitely may take precedence. But again, when you're coming from a Division II level and you're trying to get recruited by Division I schools, there also comes the level of, okay, now who's going to give me that best chance to develop and keep pushing further? So, when it really with Suggs, it comes down to what his priorities are. And of course, he doesn't say a whole lot. So it's hard for us to really read into that too much.
Well, the good news is we know he's got a Final Six, or what we think is a Final Six. And I would think at this point, listen, he's going to have, these programs are going to want him in their summer workout program. I think this will resolve itself sooner rather than later. He was the only I posted something on the board about how he had changed his visit from 1 day or 2 days to 1 day at Florida State. And somebody thought that meant he felt negatively about Florida State. I will tell Florida State fans this: almost every visit he took after Wisconsin was a 1 day visit, simply because he was trying to get to as many schools as he could, or as many schools as he wanted to seriously consider. So now, obviously, he still has the right to take official visits, and we know recruiting is fluid, so we'll see what happens with JVR Suggs. But, he is down to what we think is a Final Six, and we'll obviously keep you updated. I've got messages out to him today. He's a hard man to track down, but he's got a lot of people trying to talk to him. So we'll see what happens. All right, so we've heard a lot. We said about 3 weeks ago that with FSU's need at linebacker and Cam Riley decommitting from his commitment to North Carolina State, that the outside linebacker, inside linebacker, edge player from Auburn would be somebody that Florida State would probably go back after. We did not need a crystal ball to figure that out, but we were right about that. We said 3 weeks ago this was going to play itself out this way. Cam's interesting. Florida State does need somebody, I think, to compete with Blake at that what I call the will linebacker position. I'm not sure that's what they call it, but more of your sideline to sideline linebacker, not a Mike. He's interesting. He's 6'5", 240. He started out as an inside linebacker at Auburn, has played in a 4-3 and a 3-4 system, has played on the edge, has played at outside linebacker. Fish, where do you see Cam fitting into this defense as it's currently constructed?
They need him because they need linebackers. We've discussed this for a long time. I think the little footage that I've seen of him at Auburn, I think he's more athletic than Sean Murphy. I think he gives them a guy that they could actually move around a little bit, blitz him, maybe bring him off the edge. He seems a little more athletic. So anytime they could help that room from a size and athleticism standpoint, I think it could only help. They need guys. I do like what I saw out of DJ Lundy in the spring game. I thought, wow, this kid's come a long way. You want to talk about that word developing. I thought they did a very good job with him. And Nicholson showed promise in the spring game. But after that, there really wasn't a whole lot after that. So this guy's only going to help them if he steps on campus. I know they don't play a lot of 3 linebacker sets, but they still need depth. They need guys that can rotate because they're going to, they use linebackers too on special teams. So it's always important to have some of these guys on your roster that could actually play. So it'll be interesting. I think he'd be a great get for Florida State.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him because you really don't see a lot of 6'5" guys playing inside the box, right? I mean, that's on the second level. So I can't wait to see him. But, yes, I agree with you, Fish. I think that they're probably bringing him in to help that position where Blake and Sean Murphy, we have Sean Murphy projected. But, Nick, what are your thoughts on Riley?
Yeah, I mean, one thing that he gives you is size at the linebacker position, and he's really athletic. He's a lot faster than I think the tape shows. I think if you're looking for a guy to play off Nicholson, especially if Nicholson is going to be one of those guys kind of in the 1 and the 2s in terms of that side of the depth chart, I think he'd be a perfect fit. And I would say that this is probably a guy that, Florida State needs at this point. I don't know that Sean Murphy necessarily had the best spring. I think DJ Lundy, out of the return or new faces rather, probably impressed the most. But look, Florida State needs linebackers, as to Fish's point. He's big, he's athletic. That's exactly the kind of physicality that Mike Norvell likes to have on his defense. And we felt that when he went or committed to NC State originally, that it was a miss for Florida State and that Florida State probably should have gotten him. So it looks like they're getting a second shot here. And assuming that he does lock it in and become a Seminole, he's going to be somebody that I think this defense really needs.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be fascinating. And again, I think this will play itself out sooner rather than later as far as him committing. He's already been committed to one program for 4 months, didn't work out. I think he's going to want to solidify what his plans are. And I would venture to guess that the decision has already been made. It's only a formality at this point. Now, I'm talking about whether it's Florida State or somebody else, right? But I think he knows where he's going at this point. He's had almost 6 months to figure this out. But it would be fascinating to see how they use him, where they use him. I think he is a guy that can play linebacker. He's also a guy that could probably line up on the edge and third and long, second long situations and help you with a little bit of pass rush. But you feel good about where Florida State is at defensive end coming out of spring, but he's also a guy that's got the length to line up and the size to line up as a pass rusher on pass downs. All right, guys, so we take a look at the portal. We might get a surprise or two. You don't ever know. The portal's strange. One of the things that we're doing at the Osceola.com or FloridaState.rivals.com is we're doing updates on the 2025 recruiting board by position. We took a little bit of a look at offensive line early in the week, and we're going to work our way back to that. But, guys, what I was working on yesterday, and just so happened some news started to break on this position, but I started putting together the 2025 recruiting board for tight ends, and it was very light. We know that Mike Norvell likes to use tight ends in his offense. At one time, there were as many as 8 guys on scholarship at tight end in this program since Mike's been here. But before yesterday morning, they only had one kid scheduled to come in for an official visit, and that was Chase Lofton from Omaha, Nebraska. On Monday, Hollis Davidson, one of my favorite tight ends in this class, decommitted from Auburn on Monday and set up an official visit with Florida State on Tuesday. He will be on campus June 21st. So right now, Fish, you've got Chase Lofton and Hollis Davidson coming in for officials. You've got Keati Armstrong, who's got FSU in the top 10, but has not set up an official visit. Olish has FSU, and Andrew Olish has FSU in his top 8, but no official visit set. And then you've got a couple guys like Nick Townsend, who's offered and only got 2 official visits set up. But just talk a little bit about what kind of priorities are Lofton and Davidson are now with Florida State, because they're the only 2 tight ends they've got coming in on officials right now.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think they need to improve that room. It's kind of crazy. After Jaheim Bell left early for the draft, you watched the guys in the spring game. I don't think really any of the tight ends really stood out. I think they need to improve the athleticism in that room. I think they need to get better at that position, get a true number 1 tight end. Norvell likes to use a tight end in his offense. Some of these guys that they're looking at are just major upgrades. I know Landon had some moments in the spring game, but he's still a freshman. So I think the floor and the ceiling of that room need to both be upgraded. And these guys that they're bringing in, Hollis and the rest of these guys, I believe are better players than what they already have on the roster.
Yeah, listen, I really think Hollis is a kid that's going to continue to blow up. There's some brand name programs that haven't offered him yet. He's in the middle of spring practice. I think you're going to see some of the bigger name programs in the Big Ten and SEC come in and offer him. He got an offer from Texas a couple of days before he decommitted from Auburn. This kid is just going to blow up. And if you have not watched Hollis Davidson's film on Huddle and you're a Florida State fan and you like tight ends, go back and watch him. I think he's one of the top tight ends in the country. But, Nick, what's your take on the tight end room or the recruiting board right now?
Well, I mean, this was desperately needed for Florida State because the tight end board was nearly non-existent. I don't know really what happened in terms of why there weren't more guys on the board. Maybe they felt really confident that they were going to pull off a flip for Elias Williams at some point. It was trending in that direction for a while, but obviously the brakes have been slammed on that, and Florida State is moving way, way, way back in that. So this really came at a pivotal time for Florida State's tight end board. And look, Davidson's right at the top of it. He's a guy that Florida State offered in fall of 2023, and he got a bunch of offers, and we thought, well, this guy is going to blow up, and he kind of did. But then, things just cooled off for him. So with him reopening his recruitment, we're going to see a lot of schools probably take a good look at him. And look, Florida State did get that official visit, but I mean, if a lot of schools come and give him a look like we expect that they will, this one could go further into the fall as well. But in terms of what this does for Florida State's tight end board right now, this needed to happen because sure, Lofton has a great, relationship with Thompson, and you got to feel good about that, OV, but you can't have that be the only one. And there needs to be more to the board. But as it is right now, this is huge for the tight end board.
Yeah, and listen, I believe Keati Armstrong has indicated that he would like to set up an official visit with Florida State. He told you that the other day, and he has just not set a date. Now, obviously, he's a guy that is got just about every Texas school offered him. I don't think he's only got official visits set up to Auburn, Texas, and Texas A&M. So you would think he's probably going to take more official visits than that. So we'll see if they can get Keati on campus. But obviously, he is a 4-star tight end out of Texas. Listen, I think it's going to be hard to get him out of Texas. There's a lot of good football programs there. So we'll see what happens. But he did have Florida State in his top 10. But he has not set an official visit date. Then you got the Olish kid out of Center Valley, Pennsylvania. Now, obviously, everybody believes that Penn State is the leader, followed by Michigan and Alabama. I still like Davidson over Olish. If I had to put them in order, Olish is only 210 pounds. He's more of a receiver-type body right now than he is a tight end-type body. So I would take Davidson and probably Lofton over him. And then, of course, you've got an offer to a guy like Nick Townsend, who's only got Arizona State and Texas set up for officials right now, another Texas tight end. So there's a ton of Texas tight ends on the board right now. Listen, to answer your question, Nick, you go back and look at our offer sheet at tight end, 75% of the guys that Florida State has offered at tight end that we're aware of have committed to other programs. So that's part of the issue. Now, Fish, I want to ask you this. Miami's got 2 2025 tight ends committed, including Brock Schott, who was on Florida State's campus in April, had at Florida State as one of his top schools prior to his commitment to Miami. You think there's any way they get back in that battle for Brock, given the fact that the Hurricanes have 2 tight ends committed right now?
Yeah, I definitely think they have a shot because Miami is still recruiting the kid from Georgia. He's been on campus multiple times. I went down there for a spring practice, and Elias was down there. That was the whole thing with him. I was like, he keeps showing up at Miami, but he's not showing up at Florida State, which is kind of crazy since Florida State's closer. But I definitely think Schott is a guy that, if Miami does get one more tight end, one of these guys that's committed to them is going to be looking for another school.
Yeah. And he's a great looking prospect himself. I watched his film as well. He's rated the 10th best tight end in the nation. So, and listen, the other thing, Fish, and you're at high schools every day down there in South Florida, and some great talent. A tight end, these tight end body types, much like offensive linemen, kind of take a while to develop, right? Because these kids are 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". They don't always grow into their bodies at the same time. And I've always said that on positions like that, positions like tight end, defensive line, offensive line, you can find some late bloomers on the recruiting trail in May prior to a kid's senior year. Then obviously during the fall, is there any tight ends that are kind of off the radar that stand out to you? Or just as a general question, do you think Florida State can go out and find another legitimate tight end prospect that's kind of a late bloomer as a rising senior?
Yeah, there's a kid that has offers from Syracuse right now and a couple other schools. He doesn't have big time offers right now, but there's a tight end at Shorecrest High School. Hold on one second. His name's Wesley Ryan. He's 6'7". He's about 240-pound kid that I saw him on film. I know like Syracuse, Rutgers, some of these schools have offered him. I think he's a guy that maybe they bring to camp. Big kid, kind of like a more athletic version of Kaz Borowski. So it'll be interesting to see someone like that. He's a basketball kid from St. Pete area. So those guys, it's just Florida doesn't produce tight ends. I mean, you go look at Georgia, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 tight ends I have as like major Power 5, tight ends. They got, you got Elias Williams, who's committed to Georgia. You got Hollis Davison that you're talking about. They got Ryan Gaya, who's committed to Auburn. You got another kid, Ethan Barbour, that's committed to Auburn. Hayden Bradley is another guy. Clemson has this kid, Logan Brooken, committed. It's just crazy how many tight ends come from that state. I don't know if that's because there's former NFL guys, that these guys are more athletic. It just seems like the state of Florida, those guys that are playing basketball that should be playing tight end and playing football aren't out there. You may get 1 or 2 good tight ends a year if you're lucky in the state, where Georgia or some of these other states are producing, 7, 8 Power 5 guys every year.
Yeah. Well, I think this is a position they'll continue to cultivate a board with, and they'll add new guys to it as the season moves on. And I would think that they'll want to bring in at least 1, maybe 2. And I don't know whether they have a plan to bring 1 high school kid in and try to go in the portal and grab 1 in January. We'll see. But certainly it'll be a position that I think they'll continue to add kids to their board on. All right, Fish. So we got your stock up and stock down report yesterday. Another name that we haven't talked a ton about, and the more I watch this film, the more I like him, and that's Josh Petty, the offensive tackle. I think he's an offensive tackle. I've seen other services that have him rated as a guard. I don't see it. He's a defensive end tight end in high school. If you watch his high school film, a lot of times he lines up as a tight end. They put him in motion. I think he's a tackle all the way. A lot of buzz about him in Florida State right now. You've got him as your number 1 guy. Stock up. Why do you think Josh is trending with Florida State?
I mean, for some reason, Florida State's now leading for him, and I spoke to somebody I trust that told me they feel Florida State's in the lead for him. I don't know. His first clip, he literally picks somebody up and tosses them like luggage. I mean, it's just like he's working at the airport tossing big bags because he's nasty. I mean, he kind of reminds me of the Marius Mims film. I remember Marius Mims that came out, Salva. We all thought he was the number 1 guy, while Clemson got Tristan Lee, and Tristan Lee we weren't as high on. And it seems like we had it right. I think Petty's in that same group. I mean, I don't need to see a whole lot to realize if this kid's what he looks like on film, he's the real deal. Now there's one other guy on that the recruiting board that they're recruiting, I believe, out of Texas. That's a little longer, taller, athletic looking guy. But Petty is just nasty. Has that mean streak. Has that. You don't see that from high school guys. You know this as well as I do. Most of these big kids are told, don't hit that smaller kid. Don't, like, their whole life they're being told because they're so much bigger than everybody. He has a little bit of the pouncies in him. I mean, he's just flat out nasty, Petty. I love his film. I can't imagine there's too many better than him walking a high school sideline. And if you could get someone like him, and then you bring in a Solomon Thomas, those days of Florida State struggling at tackle are over. I mean, you're talking they're going to have all Americans, not all conference type players.
Yeah, listen, I put in our offensive line board articles that while Haywood is a great looking prospect, and he is, and I can only imagine that Tyron Smith, that might have been what he looked like coming out of high school. Hayward's a 5-star guy, looks impressive. As you put, he's kind of more polished at this point, more developed than Petty. But I think Petty might have the best upside of anybody in that offensive line group, especially at tackle. You go watch his film, as you said. He has not even – listen, he's not even gotten anywhere near as strong as he needs to be when you watch his film. You can tell that. But he's – and all these guys, the one thing I've been impressed with as I went back through the film as I was working on that article, all these guys that the Florida State's recruiting have mean streaks, like the kind of, you don't see many passive kids on the field. So I think it's going to be interesting. And listen, you still we do have an update. You still got Zaire Addison trending to Florida State, as I do. I believe Nick's got him trending to Florida State as well. But Nick also reported yesterday that Addison has now added an official visit to Georgia, which was not on his list as of last week. So now, listen, obviously it's got to be a committable offer from Georgia and all those things. Do you still, even with that addition to his official visit calendar, Fish, do you still feel like Zaire is and FSU are in lockstep right now?
Yeah, I think the ties to Atkins, and they've done a very good job, was an earlier offer. I think they've done a very good job of, recruiting him. Listen, anytime Georgia's recruiting a kid, they're going to listen. I feel good about it. Things could change, but I think Florida State sits in a good spot. As long as he keeps showing up on campus, you got to like their chances. I think he'll be there at their June camp. I think they're going to continue to recruit him hard. He just seems like a kid. I just picture him at Florida State.
Yeah, I do too. He's from Tampa. He's been here a ton. So I agree with you there. Now, one guy that you had on your trending down, and I think we're on the same page here, but I want to ask you to kind of explain it. You have Peyton Joseph trending down, the offensive guard from Houston County, Warner Robins, who was committed to Florida, then decommitted, then spent almost the entire month of April. And I'm being a little bit dramatic in saying that, but he was here for almost an entire week. Saw 3 practices in 1 week. Was recently seen. Listen, I don't get into what gloves they're wearing and what cleats and whatever, but he did have a nice little Florida State chain on the other day. He's got FSU, LSU, and Memphis scheduled for official visits. Fish, why? What was your reasoning for having him trending the opposite way?
I thought, they're sitting in such a good position having Solomon Thomas. They have Petty. Watching his film, I thought of all the guys, I really thought he was the one guy. Well, he can play tackle. He maybe he's like a Bobby Hart type, but I thought he was more of a guard.
I agree totally with that.
And I just think that Florida State's mentality is if we can get guards out of the portal, I think they'll go that route unless the kid's really, really good. And I think they still lead for Buchanan, even though Buchanan's probably going to be a center. I don't know how many interior guys. I think if they're going to take somebody, it's going to be more of the traditional spot type kids. So that's the only reason. It's more of a gut. It's not something I've heard or something that I've heard from the player itself. I look at all the guys that you guys have put in front of me, and I thought, all right, as a tackle, he'd be a little further down the list, whereas maybe as a guard, maybe he's closer to the top. And how many of those do they really need? And that's just my thinking on the whole thing. 2, when a kid decommits and he takes all these visits to a school like he does to Florida State, and they don't pull the trigger right away, is that the kid or is that the coaching staff saying, pumping the brakes? So I have a little concerns there too, because there have been all those signs that Florida State would be the school that he picks, and he hasn't yet. So are they waiting? Is this do they spread their commitments out? Do they want to get a little run in the summertime? That's something I don't know what the Florida State coaches are thinking. That's my thinking on the whole thing. It's not like, hey, I've heard the kid's going somewhere else or he's leaning that way. That's just being through the whole recruiting process so many times, Pat, like you know how it is. You kind of get a feel of how these things go. Usually when a kid's been on campus as much, it's kind of the same thing I have with the Gregory Thomas kid out of Heritage. At what point does a kid commit when they're supposed to, and those are concerns of mine.
Well, going back through, as I went back and started watching the film of all the offensive linemen that are going to be on campus, and then you take that and you marry that up with how many times they've been on campus, me reading the tea leaves is that this is working on Florida State's timeline, and that maybe listen, I think they may take. I've got them projected to take 4 or 5 high school offensive linemen. I think you would project the same thing. I'm not sure if he's in that top 4 or 5 when you go back and watch the film. I agree with you. He's the least versatile of the guys. I think he plays tackle in high school, but I don't think he's a tackle in college. I think the other guys are longer athletes than he is. including Rowan Byrne from New Jersey. He's got a wingspan of 6'10" for a 6'6" guy. You go back and watch his film, it's better. But I agree with you. I think this is on Florida State's timeline with Joseph. Nick, what's your take on Joseph and Zaire?
Well, yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, Pat. I think they're working off of Florida State's timeline. I don't know how serious. I mean, it's got to be some level of seriousness if you're taking official visits to these schools. But with how often he's been here, and he is the cousin of TJ Ferguson. Not that you always necessarily need to play with family, but I think that Florida State may see this guy as just a safe backup option at this point, especially with all the guys that they're going after that are at this time much better prospects on their board. That's kind of just the feeling that I have on Joseph. In terms of Zaire Addison, I mean, every single time that I've personally spoken with the kid, he always brings up how Florida State was the first school to believe in him, was the first school to offer him, was the first school to see the potential in him when he was 6'3" and 240. He gives me the dimensions every time. But now he's a 6'5" prospect, close to 290 pounds, and he's a legitimate power 4 prospect that has the potential to start somewhere down the line. So I think every single time, Addison brings up his relationship with Coach Norvell and Coach Atkins and how they were the first to kind of see the potential in him. I think with him adding official visits, he's enjoying the recruiting process. He's gone out to Oregon. He's gone out to Colorado. He's been all over the country the past few months, and I think he's enjoying the process. But if I'm a betting man, I think his heart still lies at Florida State at this moment.
Yep, I agree. I think they lead with him. I do think that once you start getting more people involved, it gets a little bit murkier, especially when those other schools are Georgias and the Alabamas of the world. So we'll see how it plays out. But yeah, I still like their chances. I would still say they lead for Zaire. Another couple guys on your stock down fish. And I think we've kind of seen this develop slowly, and I tend to agree with you, even though I think they're still in the thick of it. But you've got them trending in the wrong direction with defensive end Zion Grady. I don't think that battle got any easier when he visited Ohio State last week on an unofficial visit. And listen, there's some recency in these bias in these interviews. Every kid comes out of an unofficial visit raving about his unofficial visit. He did the same thing with Ohio State, said it was next level or something to that extent. He's now set an official visit with Ohio State, but you think there's another program that leads for him, Fish. Tell me what's going on with Zion.
Yeah, I think Miami's got a very good shot. He's been on their campus. That's the whole thing, is how many times has he been at Florida State? It just seems it's one of these situations where every time he's supposed to go to Florida State or they're in it, it's kind of like that the French kid. They're in it, they're not in it, they're in it. I don't know. It's too volatile, the situation for Florida State. I just don't like their chances. Now, if they get them on campus a couple times, they get them to their summer camp, and they could get a hold of them and show them what they've done with their defensive end position. I think they have an easy sell from that standpoint. Nobody's done a better job the last 2 years, 3 years of producing. You've seen what happened with Marvin Jones in their spring game. They continue to get these guys to come in and play above the level they were at before they got here. So I think Florida State has a lot to offer. I just don't know if they're in the ball game with him, truly in the ball game.
Yep. Nick, how are you reading the tea leaves on Grady?
Yeah, the more and more we talk about Grady, the more and more I feel like Florida State is the odd team out in terms of the revolving door of 4 or 5 teams that Grady is considering. Because at one point, obviously, he committed to Alabama, decommitted after Saban retired. Then it's like, okay, he's definitely going to Georgia. And then it's Miami, and then now it's Ohio State. It's just one of those guys that there's a new flavor of the month with Grady, and it just never feels like that flavor of the month is Florida State. They haven't been that flavor of the month yet. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't ever be, but Grady just does not, to me, feel like Florida State. They're kind of on the outside looking in. It's kind of my perception of it. I mean, he enjoys the school. He likes the school, but in terms of the revolving door of schools that he's considering, I don't feel like that connection is there.
Yeah, and it's crazy with his recruitment too, because I think if we'd gone back to January, we all would have said Florida State's leading for him.
Yeah.
I even felt much better about their chances leaving Atlanta 3 weeks ago, leaving the Rivals Elite camp there, because kind of the buzz was there for whatever reason. The interest on either his side for Alabama and Georgia or their side, how they felt about Grady. My understanding was those two programs were no longer highly involved in his recruiting process. So I was like, well, that's got to help Florida State, right? I mean, it's got to help every program when Alabama and Georgia are no longer involved. So I think again, Miami's making a big push with a lot of kids. They've done you could say what you want about Miami and Mario Cristobal, but they're recruiting at a really high level right now when you're getting in on kids like Zion Grady and the Elias Williams kid that we talked about, the tight end from Georgia, who's committed to Georgia but has been to Miami twice in 3 months and 0 times to Florida State, which is much closer. So be interesting to see how it plays out. Listen, obviously there's a lot of variables involved in these recruiting processes that at least weren't above board many years ago. So we'll see how all that plays out. Another guy, now this guy's I go back and forth on this one, Fish. Osman Cromah, the running back from Lee County, Georgia. I can't make up my mind whether they're trending the right way or the wrong way with this kid. I know you've got him trending down right now. He was on campus for the spring game, I believe. I think Nick did an article with him. We kind of think that Georgia is the team that leads there, but I will listen to an interview that somebody did with him the other week or a couple days ago, and he just raved about Mike Norvell's my guy. Where do you think they are with Cromah? Obviously, they got a chance, but where do you think they stand with Cromah?
Yeah, I hate to. I'm not going to diagnose him as bipolar, but this kid really just changes his mind. It's like he likes FSU and Norvell's the greatest thing, and then all of a sudden they're in it, they're out of it. It's like a seesaw. I don't know where to really put this. I really thought they had a shot at him early on. He was definitely. They had 3 guys I thought were above everybody else. The Henderson kid that ended up committing to Penn State, Byron Lewis, and they have Cromah. I have him rated as the number 1 running back in Georgia from the kids I've watched. He's a very good and super talented running back. He'd be a great get, but it just seems like they're fighting an uphill battle constantly with this kid, trying to get him on campus, trying to get him to lock him down as a Florida State type commitment. But right now it just seems like it's up and down. Next week, I may do another stock up, stock down, and he's back on the stock up side. So, I mean, he's a very volatile stock.
It is fluid. And I know Nick talked to him after the spring game, and, listen, he was very positive. I know Cam Davis was tweeting at him the other day, trying to get him, pushing toward Florida State. But Nick, what's your take on Osman?
Cam Davis still recruiting a class that's not even his.
That's
I love Cam. Look, it's an interesting one because Cromah was a guy that they had been trying to get on campus for a while. And for whatever reason, he just was not there until suddenly he just shows up for the spring game. And when you talk to him, he's like, oh, I really miss this place. It seems like they missed me. And he had a great visit. And, of course, I saw the same interview that you did, Pat. And he's like, Norvell's my guy. We're really close. He was outside of he was waiting to enter a meeting with Norvell, and Norvell's screaming at him down the hallway, as he is very prone to do. So it's my gut is telling me that Cromah is just kind of riding the waves to see what happens elsewhere. I don't know if he has a leader. I think if we had to pick one right now, it's probably Georgia just due to proximity alone. But I mean, it's one of those guys that is just kind of riding the wave until some dominoes fall elsewhere. And we'll see whether he's stock up or stock down next week. It seems like a different thing every week.
Yes,
that is the way recruiting goes.
That's right, buddy. It's about who they talk to last. Listen, I think sometimes,
it could be a visit high.
I've expressed this to you. Sometimes I think kids answer the question the way they think the person asking it wants it to be answered. They remember these are 15, 16, and 17-year-old kids. I hear a lot of leading questions out at the North Center when we were there.
Come on, really?
You don't get a whole lot of open-ended questions. You're directing them to an answer. So I think sometimes you've got to take what they say about any one school with a little bit of grain of salt, right? So, but yeah, it's going to be fascinating. He's a heck of a player, and I'm really hoping that I get a chance to go watch it this spring.
I mean, certain groups act like they're Taylor Swift and they're like 14-year-old girls, all right? I mean, come on, let's be real.
Well, I'm not going to argue with you there. I'm not going to argue with you there. All right, so listen, that we're going to that's good for recruiting. We've covered a lot of bases. Hey, just to get outside of recruiting a little bit, did you guys see any of the Tom Brady roast? I have not. I've seen some clips from it.
It was pure classic great. I mean, Nikki Glazier was awesome. I mean,
She was great.
She was phenomenal, and there was some other guy. For him to take a beating like that for 3 hours was truly impressive. I mean, it was.
I'm surprised the referee didn't come in and throw a flag for how much of a beating he was taking. He hasn't taken that much of a beating in 20 years.
Him and Gronk, everybody freaking tore into Gronk, all right?
Yeah, what about Gronk's? I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently he smashed a shot glass.
Yes,
on stage,
he did.
and apparently it hurt somebody.
No, I don't know if it hurt anybody, but he did slam it, and it shattered everywhere. And Kevin Hart was like, "Yeah, don't worry, sit down. We'll take care of this."
Oh, did you see Kevin Hart? I seen a clip of him. Now he went off on Brady.
Oh, he went off. He basically brought up that Brady's ex-wife was taking karate lessons from a jiu-jitsu guy, and how did he not know after she was taking like 6 lessons a day, and she was still a white belt after all that time? So.
Yeah.
It's pretty rough.
Yeah. I don't know if I could have been that good a sport about that. That's still
no way. Come on.
You're married to somebody for 13 years and got kids with them. I'm not sure I'm gonna let you
can't last 5 minutes with us. I can't imagine you in a 3-hour roast. Your ass would break.
We'd be
Nick, that would be funny, wouldn't it?
Well, the good news is I'm not going to be famous enough ever to be roasted, so that works to my advantage. But yeah,
I have to hire a bodyguard if we're going to roast Pat.
We'd be fighting at some point. You're down about that.
That you can guarantee.
Especially if you start talking. Listen, even if he doesn't like the mother of his children, there's still the mother of his children. So anyway, but I can't wait to watch it. That's going to be fascinating. That's going to be and listen. I know somewhere on social media they've got the unused jokes of the Glazer girl. Nikki said,
"Yeah, she had some."
So I gotta go back and watch that. So that's gonna be interesting to see what happens. Hey, I did want to ask you about this. I went out and saw Jalen Wiggins last Saturday at Rickards, and obviously he had not been with the football team all spring because of baseball. He's a pretty good baseball player, not Florida State good baseball, but pretty good high school baseball player. I think one of the things, if you talk to people around the program when you go out and see these kids, they did tell me, the people I talked to out there, that they felt like, when he committed to Florida, they thought this was 100% Florida. They think this is a lot more 50-50 with Jalen than they do than it had been in the past. I still think he's going to flip. What do you guys say on Jalen Wiggins?
Fish.
Nick, I think he's going to end up in FSU's class. I think Norvell understands you have a prior. You're not going to get a ton of FSU caliber players. You want to keep those guys home, and he's a position of need. You don't want somebody, especially a rival team, coming up and taking, 2 of your top defensive line prospects that you've offered. I definitely think they'll end up landing Wiggins, and it wouldn't surprise me if they also landed the kid from Gadsden at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that the chances are currently rising in Florida State's favor to flip him. I think as the season goes on, those chances, if Florida has the season that we think they're probably going to have with that schedule, that things will get a little bit worse for them there. And especially with Javion Hilson not being a sure thing, he's still enjoying his recruiting process. That's by no means locked up. So they're going to make Wiggins a priority. They're going to make both of them a priority, and they're going to try and keep Wiggins in town. So I think that the odds are rising in Florida State's favor to flip. I think they'll eventually get it done, but they're definitely making him a priority, and there's some other factors around that kind of aid that opinion.
All right. Well, listen, it's going to be. I agree. I think we're going to see a rash of commits in June to Florida State and other schools. I think the picture will look a lot clearer. But I'm kind of with you. I think we'd all feel better about this recruiting class if it had more than 4 commitments. But I just think that's the way these things are going to play out. There's not a lot of programs that have many more than 4 or 5 commitments on their board right now. So we'll see how it goes. Did you guys happen to watch any of the Kentucky Derby? Did you win any money off the Kentucky Derby?
Not my thing. I didn't watch it, but I did see that this is like the first photo finish in God knows how long time, like 1970 or something, right?
Yeah, I was very disappointed that Hard Rock Bets did not allow you to bet on the horse race, because you're not going to believe this. I was going to pick Mystic Dan, who won the race. It was like 20-1. That was going to be my guy. Now, nobody's going to believe me because I couldn't bet. But that was going to be – and I pick horses by names, right? I mean, I don't know anything about horse racing. So
I wish you had told me.
I pick horses like some people pick football teams because of they pick because they like the uniforms better than somebody else. I pick horses based off names. Same way I pick wine. I pick wine off the label of the bottle, which has got the coolest label, because I don't know anything about wine either. All right, guys. Listen, we will be back next week with another edition of the Osceola's Reeling Them In with Fish and Nick. And if you're not an Osceola subscriber, please go to theosceola.com or floridastate.rivals.com and check us out. We've got recruiting content. Fish's stock up, stock down is and behind the paywall, so you will have to subscribe to get that. We did not cover. He covered about 15 kids in the report. I think we covered 6 of those, so you got 9 more kids to read about. We just did our Florida State offensive line board article for 2025, where Nick and I broke down favorites by talent or potential, and then favorites by who is most likely to sign with Florida State. Again, we think they'll take 4 or 5 off of high school offensive linemen. So you can go to floridastate.rivals.com or theosceola.com to check that out. We've also got the latest on Omarion Cooper's re-signing with Florida State. Obviously, then we've got our tight end board preview getting ready to come out later today or tomorrow. If you only watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to the Osceola YouTube page and channel, and hit like and subscribe. That way you get notifications so that you get alerts to when we're doing a tape show or a live show. And obviously, as we get closer and closer to football season, we will be doing more Reeling Them Ins and more Seminole Sidelines as we get a little bit closer. And obviously, we'll have plenty to talk about when high school camp season starts on June the 2nd. But, guys, you guys have a great rest of the day. If you're an Osceola subscriber, thanks for subscribing. If you subscribe to the YouTube page, thanks for subscribing to the YouTube page or YouTube channel. I don't know why I call it a page. I just do. But anyway, it's the same damn thing. You get the URL and go. But, guys, you guys have a great day. Thanks, as always, for your help, and we will see you next time on Reeling Them In.
Hey, Seminole fans. Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI, or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop.